So we're gonna go through some language first. We're gonna be talking about the story of Moro Hill, and that story takes place in Temecula, and in Chamtela, Temecula is Temeku. Um, and this place is named because that's where the sun rises, and I'm pretty sure that's literally what Temeku means, is where the sun rises. Um, so yeah, so that's our first language word, Temeku. And then our next location, one of the locations that we see in our story, is going to be Lake Elsinore in Chamtela. Our language is Payachchi, Payachchi, and that's Lake Elsinore. And then, of course, the whole reason for this story, Moro Hill, Katuktu, Moro Hill, Katuktu. And then we have another hill that we're going to talk about. This is kind of one of the couplets. I know that we've talked about having couplets in our other stories. And Hu'ilila, observation point, is the couplet to Moro Hill. And you'll see kind of how they're juxtaposed in our story later. Hu'ilila. And then there's going to be a flood in the story. And that's Yalachish. Yalachish means flood in Chamtela. And with flood, the water goes up. So we're going to be talking about the water going up. Etchi, etchi. So if you're saying the water's going up, the water's going etchi, the water's at the top, the water is etchi. It's the same word. And then at the end of a flood, the water goes back down, right? Tonga, tonga, back to the bottom. And then some of the things that you got to protect when you're in a flood, or some things that you got to move. And we moved it a lot. We're nomadic. We never stayed in one place. We had our quicha with us. And our quichas were made out of like willow, elderberry branches. I know some people would like use the clay dirt to block out, the outside dust from coming in. We'd also make little brooms out of the hearts of yucca plants to kind of sweep out all the extra dirt at the front of our quichas. So that's one word. I think one of the first words I also learned when I was learning Chamtela was quicha, my house. And then, of course, we're going to talk about pala, our water. So that's rainwater, ocean water, drinking water, pala. And you guys might know Pala Reservation. It was named after the word Pala because that's where we knew the water was. That's where the San Luis River was from. So we said that's where the water is. And they took it as, oh, that's the name of the place, is Pala. So that's how they got that name. Okay, and then our characters are going to be moving a lot, and well, not a lot. They're gonna make a big move in this. So haya or hayi means to move, but huna is break camp and move. So when you'd have to break down your quicha and take it with you, or just break down your structures and bring that with you and find leaves later, you do that.
And I put in a little review to go over some colors. So in Chamtela, blue is malomlish. Green in Chamtela is konoknish. And yellow is ashotshush. All right, so orange is ashotshush yuvata.
Literal word translation, ashotshush means yellow, and yuvata means black. So yellow and black, when they're mixed together, they make orange. So it's a short shish yubata.
White, Huaya.
So it's one of those words that starts with an X. So you gotta start with the H in your throat right here. Huaya. Huaya. A hot hush. So it's that same X that you see in Huaya to hot hush. Okay, so like I said, we did do a reading of this story once before. This opening is from another event, pre-COVID area. The storytellers would go and travel to different schools, universities, and events, and we'd share our traditional, songs, stories, and games. At the Valley Center School Districts, we'd bring our children's games. At most college events, we'd perform, live actions of the stories. For events, we do so many different things. We either do our medicinal plant project, another story, a cultural game. We used to do medicine bundles, a lot of stuff at these events. And we had a lot of students, and we love them so much, but we know a lot of them are focusing on their schoolwork right now, and we appreciate them and we applaud them, and we're constantly sending them prayers when we're here at the Ed Center. But like I said, a couple of them were able to hop on a Zoom with us and record. And I do want to preface that this was probably one of our first Zoom calls that we did with each other. So we're kind of still figuring out like unmuting, when to speak, figuring out if we were even loud enough, if we could hear each other. So you guys are going to get the raw footage of this reading. But yeah, it's us. It's the storytelling group, raw and action.
For a second, I was like, oh, did I miss something?
Here they are at the SDSU Res Beats, where I am not there, but our friends Jake and Dakota were there to help them. Here we are at the Santa Barbara College. We're preparing for our performance. Here we are practicing for that performance with our fellow storytellers, Diego, Alex, and Temet.
Yung cho'ano nutog anayka no ashnay pi ipay no kwam antidote padidor on John Lachofa.
Miram notong Amy Admariaka non washnai non payom kawichum noquam Joseph Morales Delacob and Marcella Mason. And I will be reading Chantela.
The story we're going to be reading is Katuktu, the story of Moro Hill, a local Southern California American Indian story from long, long ago.
That's so now it'll stay like this.
This is the account of the beginning at Temecula, Payachi at Lake Elsinore, where the people first appeared and lived in peace. So they lived until it happened, until the sea besieged them.
Iviptela choch ivo tameku poto payachi neveuna kunum chochanek atahum kalkush ayalinek. Pi kalkush pi pa wuko Pomoto wam wota pomoma pala.
All the Lusania people fled to Katuktu, Moro Hill. All the hills were becoming covered with water. The waters rose up, and soon they sought refuge at Moro Hill.
Picho onom nalaham katuktuyik. Kawicha cho on yopuk. Hala muyak. Pipa ashunga kunom nalaham katuktu poik.
And they remained there as the waters covered them. They ascended chanting, Huyata, Katuktu, Huyata, and the hill continued to rise, bearing them with it.
Pi okaham poto pomomi yopika mama pala. Pi kunum hilala. Huyata katuktu huyata. Pi puyamangai kawicha kari mokush pomomi ayananik.
And to this very day it stands there erect. Thus the Lisanio people were saved. And there stands another hill. Its name is Observation Point Hulila. Hulila looked down on those people, and they were carried up to the summit.
Pi poto ivi temet teak witaka. Pi ahananik no laham ataham. Pi kawicha awo sheka. Hulila yakapotum. Pa kuna ayalanik. Huliktum atahmi ponemi putalah.
The waters receded. The Lisanio people were spared, and to this very day the ashes are there at the stone fire ring. There is also water there and pottery. This is what remains recently. The remains of human habitation are still there on Moro Hill.
Pala wahya nola ataham. Pi ashunga ivi temet pito miaka. Telingas. Top like. Paula ashunga peshlish ashunga iyaka miyaka. Ipe pitoku ipe. Hach aki kicha miyaka. Katuktu poto.
Mayu Kai Morapa. Children, don't forget.
That was the story of Moro Hill. Just to kind of review, it's not really like all of our other stories, right? With our story of the ocean people and mountain people, you were able to keep track of, what was going on, who was doing what competition, and who won. And then with the story of Shiskala, we learned that he had a job to put the stars in the sky. And he kind of got, his ego was a little too big and he got punished, for not doing his job anymore. But the story of Moro Hill is exactly that. It's just a story that we have on account. And that's how a lot of our stories are actually. We have giant books of transcripts. Actually, let me show you one of the books that we have. We have these books. It's from the original language people, our last fluent speakers of Lisanio. They sat down with some researchers from various colleges and a bunch of linguistic professors. A lot of non-natives actually got their linguist degrees from our elders and our reservation people translating these words for them. But it wasn't just them taking, because their work that they did through those schools saved a lot of our history. So we're able to save stories like this. And this story, it kind of doesn't really have like a message at the end of it, but it does kind of explain how I was going to say, let's say, how Payonkwitchan people are always connected to the earth. As long as we give to the earth, it will give to us, it will protect us, and it will give us what we need, right? So yeah, that was, a shorter story. We got some good language. So we always say at the end of our stories, you'll see that, Amayum Kai Morapak. Children don't forget. So we end all of our stories, even when we perform it at schools, if we're doing readings, or even if we're just telling the story right here in the center, we always say Amayum Kai Morapak. children don't forget. Because all these stories, even though they're labeled stories, we know that these readings and the books that we've made, these are historical accounts of our ancestors. And I'm not sure if we shared this earlier, but the Leseño people, before we took this form, our human form, we were the plants and the animals, and the rocks and the trees and the air. We were everything, before we took this human form. And we know that our ancestors put a lot of work into creating the world that we have today. So, like I said, or how we've read about earlier, Shiskala, one of our ancestors, he gave us fire with his twirling sticks. And then Shiskala, or Quila, blew fire, gave us fire with his rubbing sticks. And then Shiskala, Stinkbug, he put the stars in the sky for us, right? He's the reason why we have the Big Dipper and the Little Dipper and Orion's belt and all that, right? And then Katuktu is just a good story to remember that the earth is always there. The earth isn't punishing you. Sometimes she needs to clean herself out. She needs to blow some of the trash away. She needs to wring things out and wash them all over again. But she's never here to hurt us. And there's always a safer place to get to. We just follow the earth, we listen, to where we need to go. We have so many stories that, teach us lessons or teach us history, and we don't want you guys to ever forget that this is history. They're not just stories, they're histories.